this week we will be doing some more reactivity type stuff, and this time in terms of that reactivity we're actually going to be kind of filtering inputs that are already on the screen. What I mean by that essentially is we're going to have a breakdown between team and players. So you can select a team, and that input where it showed all the players that we've seen in the previous videos, it will only show players who have played on that team. So again, if you have not watched either of the first 3 parts, please watch them now. This will be confusing if you haven't watched the first 3 parts. One quick thing that I'm going to show you for us to be able to filter by teams and player names is we're actually going to use some dplyr code in this StatCast dataset. So first we'll obviously get our query from our StatCast data. Again, if you've already watched the first 3 parts, you already know what I'm talking about, but please watch it if you haven't. If you've gotten this far in this video and you have not watched the first 3 parts, stop. Go watch the first 3 parts. Anyways, so piping operator, mutate, and I'll say bat_team. And it'll be a simple if-else statement where I'm saying if the inning underscore top bot, which is just top or bottom of inning, equals top, then we will say the away team is the bat team. So away_team. Otherwise, we will say home team. So that way, when we do our filtering by that data set, we can properly adjust and get the proper names for the specific instances of batters. So now we'll scroll down to our inputs now. So I will add an input, 1, and 2, we're actually going to change from select input to select ties input. And why we're going to do that is that allows us to create that dynamic filtering within that input. So I will actually copy and paste the select input here and say select input. Instead I'll say team. And replace player name. So instead of saying choices unique SC $ player name, we'll say SC $ bat team. And we'll say select, instead of saying select batter, we'll say select team. So our input ID is team, our display is select team, our choices are obviously the batting team. And instead of saying select input, we will say select ties input. And we'll do the same for the other one. So that way, we'll have both the select ties inputs in order for us to create that dynamic filtering. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to our server session. And if you haven't already, make sure you have server function input output session, because adding that session allows us to create that dynamic filtering that I was mentioning earlier. So we will do output, or excuse me, we'll actually do a reactive environment. So again, I showed you how to do reactive in the 2nd video. So now in the 4th video, I'm going to show you another reactive element that's based upon the inputs. So teams reactive, and we're going to say just team, and this time we're going to use subset. We'll say subset SC, and we'll say bat team %, %. So that just essentially means, hey, we're going to select the bat team in input.team. So the reason why we're using subset in this case is because it allows us to use that in function for that select ties input to dynamically filter. Like I said before, I'm saying dynamically filtering a lot, and I never expected that. But essentially what we're doing with that is we're allowing those teams and players to dynamically filter. So let's say if you pick the Angels, it will only show players like Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, David Fletcher, so on and so forth. And then we're going to use a dplyr function, and I'll just say team again, not team, pull, and then inside pull, team, and then this is where we'll say player, or actually, excuse me, in quotes, we will say player name. So that way, we have that reactive environment. Now, we're going to add an observe element. And what essentially this observe element does is it allows us to, when we ever change that team input, so if we go from Angels to Dodgers, that observe element will say, okay, you just went from Angels to Dodgers. We're going to change the inputs of the player names from guys who are on the Angels to guys who are on the Dodgers. So instead of seeing Ohtani, Trout, and Fletcher, you'll see Bellinger, Muncy, A.J. Pollock, Will Smith, so on and so forth. So we're going to say observe, and again, regular parenthesis and then the squiggly bracket, and we'll say update selectize input. And so we will say session, comma, and then our input ID is team. Our choices are, again, that reactive environment, so teams, in parentheses, and then selected equals null. And why we say null is because it will just automatically select the first player in that data set. So whoever's name appears first for that team will appear. So that's just an easy way of doing it, and for just example purposes, this is how I'm going to do it. But we have that observe element, the update selectize input, the session, which is, again, what I put up there in the top of the server side of the function with input output session. That allows us to dynamically filter, and then our input, which is our input ID, which is team that we created up here. Then our choices, teams. Again, when you create a reactive environment, you will always need to use these parentheses. So those are our choices, and selected equals null. So what I'm going to show next is that output. One quick thing that I would like to change is, instead of saying pull, I actually was supposed to say select. So we're actually selecting that column player name instead of pulling the variable player name. My apologies on that, as well as the update selectize input should be for the name and not the team, because if we use the update selectize input for the team, then that means if we selected a player, the team would dynamically update. But we want it the other way around. We want to select the team first and then the player name to dynamically update. So again, we're using a reactive environment, and we're going to subset the batting team by the input that we select, and then we select that singular column of that player, which then becomes our choices in the name input for our selectize input. Now I'll be able to show you the shiny app. So we can see in our plot that we have our team selections. Again, they're not sorted by A to Z, they're just sorted how they appear in the data set. So selecting any team should allow us to then select players on that specific team. So let's go to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati automatically updates, and we'll go to Joseph Daniel Votto, and we can see a spray chart of balls greater than or equal to 60 miles per hour. So let's go 96, and we can see his spray chart is pretty much balls to the outfield, and that's what we like to see. But again, you can select Oakland, and now it'll only go to players that are on Oakland. So let's say Marcus Semien. Now you have Marcus Semien's spray chart. Let's go to Atlanta. Let's check out Ronald Acuna Jr. Ronald Acuna Jr. spray chart on exit velo greater than or equal to 96 miles an hour. So this allows us to dynamically filter based upon another filter in an input. So if we're selecting Boston, it will only show us Boston players, in this case JD Martinez. So it gives us a unique and succinct advantage to allowing a dynamically updating Shiny web app. So what I'm actually going to show you next now is we're going to use a package in R. I will show you how to install it if you haven't already. That allows us to download this plot onto our computer. We're going to be downloading the GGiraph package, and if you haven't already, you just remove this comment from install packages and you just run that line. And it'll be installed into your machine, and then you'll call it into your library by calling library. What essentially this does is it allows us to download the plot. So if you're, say, a student manager building a web app for enterprise systems, etc., allowing another person to be able to go into that web app and download, say, a plot could be very crucial and very helpful. So this is what we're going to do with that. So we're going to load that into our library. And I will just run Control Enter. You don't have to do that for right now, but I'll run that in our code base and in our environment. So what we're going to do next now is, instead of saying render plot, we're going to say render giraffe. And what that is going to allow us to do, not only that, but also a giraffe output. Let me make sure I do that first. So change plot output to giraffe output on the dashboard side, or excuse me, the UI side. And then on the server side, we will say, instead of saying render plot, we'll say render giraffe. And now we're just going to call this G. And we'll say G equals, or you can just do the arrow with the dash. G is this, so the statcast reactive, etc. And then we will say giraffe GG object equals G. And what that will essentially do is allow us to download that plot, and I will show you on the app here shortly. Here we are with our app again, and what Giraph allows us to do is we'll go to the Angels, we'll go find Mr. Mike Trout, third one down, we'll select all his hard hit balls, so 95 plus. And now, if you look closely up in the top right corner, there's a download button. That's what Giraph allows us to do. It allows us to download a plot. So we just click that button, and it should pop up a diagram, some kind of file, where you can save it. And you just click save. So we'll just say Trout. You may or may not be able to see the screen, but if not, again, it just pulls up a file to your downloads page, maybe, and you just name it as a file. So we'll name it as, Trout 95 plus, and that's what I named it as. So that allows us to download plots. So I think it's very crucial for us to do that, and it helps as say maybe managers or maybe coaches that maybe have plots of certain players. That allows us to download that plot for that given day, and hey, we got it. It's good to go. So, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. We will continue on again once a week with videos. Please like and subscribe. Also, I'm doing Patreon as well, so feel free to chip in a couple bucks or so if you enjoy this content. I really appreciate any of it, but again, I'm not asking for anything. I just want people to get to know R and get better at it. So, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.